Circle Conundrum. A Detective Inspector Alistair Finch mystery. The rain lay on the cobblestones of London like a greasy confession, turning the streets into warped mirrors that fractured the neon glare of Piccadilly Circus into feverish streaks of red and green. Detective Inspector Alistair Finch stood beneath the overhang outside Scotland Yard, collar turned up, trench coat already darkened by the wet despite his efforts. The city pressed itself into him the way it always did, into his joints, his lungs, the hollow behind his eyes, reminding him that London never truly released anyone. It merely loosened its grip long enough for you to forget you were still held. He was thinking about tea. Proper tea. The kind brewed too long, bitter enough to demand respect. He was also thinking about a crossword puzzle he'd abandoned that morning, half-finished, a clue about patterns he couldn't quite crack. Clean rules. Honest answers. Things that stayed put when you looked at them. The telephone rang. Finch didn't move. He watched the rain creep along the pavement, pooling around a cigarette but flattened into a starburst. The phone rang again, sharper this time, insistent. With a sigh, Finch lifted the receiver. "Finch," he said. His voice sounded older than he felt, rough as gravel scraped across concrete. "Alistair, thank God." The voice was thin, breathless, wound tight with panic. "It's Thomas. Thomas Abernathy. From Cambridge." Finch closed his eyes. Abernathy summoned an image of pale hands permanently smudged with ink, a man who lived more comfortably among abstractions than among people. A theoretician. Brilliant. Nervous. The sort who mistook unease for insight. "Abernathy," Finch said. "You're calling at a dreadful hour." "I wouldn't if it weren't important," Abernathy said quickly. "It's Wiltshire. Something terrible has happened." "That's a county, Thomas, not a crime." "A farmer is dead," Abernathy whispered. "In the middle of a crop circle." Finch straightened despite himself. Crop circles were tabloid nonsense, summer hysteria, bored pranksters, alien enthusiasts with too much time and not enough skepticism. Murder was something else entirely. "The local police don't know what to do," Abernathy continued. "They think it's ritualistic. Paganism. But it isn't." "You sound very sure." "I am," Abernathy said. "And I know how that sounds." Finch rubbed his eyes with thumb and forefinger. He felt suddenly, unpleasantly awake. "Send me the details. I'll be there in the morning." When the line went dead, Finch stood listening to the rain. Somewhere deep in his chest, a quiet sense of wrongness settled in, not fear exactly, but the awareness of a path stepped onto without seeing where it led. The train carried him out of London before dawn, the city thinning into suburbs, then into fields still bruised purple by night. Finch dozed fitfully, waking again and again with the sensation of falling, of chalk lines being drawn across an endless blackboard. He dreamed of circles that closed too perfectly to escape. Abernathy waited on the platform at the Wiltshire station, thinner than Finch remembered, his coat hanging off him like borrowed clothing. His eyes darted constantly, as though something might emerge from the gaps between people. "You look like hell," Finch said. Abernathy managed a weak smile. "So do you. Thank you for coming." They drove in silence through narrow roads hedged with bare branches. The countryside felt old in a way London never did, patient, watchful, indifferent. Then the road crested a low rise, and Finch saw it. The crop circle lay carved into the wheat with impossible precision. Vast, deliberate, beautiful in a way that made Finch uneasy. The stalks weren't broken, they were bent, pressed flat in smooth arcs that suggested not force but understanding, as if whatever had shaped them knew exactly how much pressure life could withstand. Finch felt it immediately. A pressure in his ears, subtle but insistent, like descending too quickly. The body lay at the center. Silas Crowther had been a large man in life. In death, he appeared oddly composed, arms folded across his chest, eyes closed as though in prayer. Candles lay scattered around him, their wax pooled and hardened into irregular, frozen drips. Symbols were etched into the earth, interlocking geometries that seemed to shift if stared at too long, their logic resisting comprehension. The local constable stood back, uneasy, boots carefully avoiding the flattened grain. "Pagan ritual, sir," the inspector offered. Books on witchcraft in his house. Neighbors say he was eccentric. Finch crouched beside the body. No blood. No bruising. No sign of restraint. This man wasn't sacrificed, Finch said quietly. He was arranged. The coroner confirmed it later. No poison. No trauma. Heart failure, possibly, but without cause, without history. A body that had simply stopped. Over the next several days, Finch worked the village slowly, deliberately. He spoke with neighbors who described Crowther as odd but harmless, a widower who kept to himself and stared at the stars. Children said his radio aerials talked to the sky. No enemies. No debts. Crowther's house told a different story. Star charts papered the walls. Radio equipment filled the spare bedroom, humming faintly even when switched off. Notebooks lay everywhere, on tables, under chairs, stacked beside the bed, each filled with equations and diagrams that spiraled toward something Finch couldn't quite see. These aren't spells, Finch muttered, turning pages carefully. They're calculations. Abernathy hovered in doorways, increasingly agitated. Silas was exploring boundaries. Between what and what? Abernathy didn't answer. Finch learned Crowther had belonged to a private group, an informal society of academics, engineers, and theorists who met irregularly to discuss ideas deemed premature. Dangerous? Finch asked. Abernathy hesitated. Unstable. The third night, Finch found the hidden room. A false wall gave way with a soft click. Inside, unfamiliar devices hummed, wires feeding into crystalline structures etched with the same symbols as the crop circle. The air felt thicker, charged. At the center lay a single notebook. The handwriting began neat, enthusiastic. Then it frayed. It responds to structure, not language. Geometry is not representation. It is access. We are mistaking invitation for permission. Thomas is afraid. He doesn't understand what this means. The final entry stopped Finch cold. It noticed me. Finch closed the book slowly, his pulse loud in his ears. He found Abernathy at dawn, standing barefoot in the circle. Rain soaked his hair, his coat discarded on the flattened wheat. You killed him, Finch said. Yes, Abernathy replied without turning. Why? Because Silas succeeded. You're telling me he contacted something, Finch said flatly. Yes. And instead of calling a doctor, you murdered him. Abernathy turned then, eyes clear and terrifyingly calm. He wasn't murdered. He completed the process. The circle was containment, Abernathy said. Not invitation. Silas understood too late. Finch cuffed him anyway. The case made headlines. Explanations were issued. The field was plowed under. Wiltshire returned to silence. Weeks later, back in London, Finch sat alone in his flat, the notebook open before him. Rain tapped against the windows. He traced one symbol absently. The lights flickered. Pressure filled the room. On the final page, a new line appeared. You understand shape now. Finch closed the book. Outside, London breathed, unaware that something vast had finally learned how to listen.